Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is about Microsoft 365 Syntex, or previously known as SharePoint Syntex. So the purpose of today is to show you how Syntex can help you achieve more with your content. I'm joined today with my business partner and co-founder of Information EXP, Ben. Good afternoon. So who's this webinar for and what are they going to get from it?
Yeah, thanks, Rupert. So this is for, as you can see, people that are overwhelmed with the amount of documentation that they have and they want to be able to extract the wheat from the chaff as such. If you find yourself manually extracting the same information from PDFs or docs, or if you're creating similar documents repetitively, it could be HR contracts, for instance, and you're finding yourself always filling in standard information like that.
Okay. And given that, what are people going to learn from today?
So we're going to focus two key aspects of this. So the first is how we can classify documents, extract and find information using the artificial intelligence found within Syntex. And then the second part of it is how we can then use that type of information to generate documents using the Syntex's templating mechanism.
Okay, perfect. So I think just for everyone's benefit, Syntex involves a lot of content management tools. They might not always flow in a logical scenario, but what we've tried to do is bring a fictitious company, Syntex Property Management, and show them how a company like this might take advantage of those tools. So in this company, what they do is they take lease agreements or rental agreements from estate agents, for example, and then they manage the property on behalf of the landlord, involving people like suppliers, or maybe they're doing inventory checks or tenant onboarding. So what does that mean in terms of information and content? They get a lot of rental agreements in, but because they're working with multiple estate agents, then they're seeing different formats, but the key information's in those documents. But currently it's a manual task, scanning each document, trying to find out when the lease start date is, when the end date is, maybe what the monthly rental is if they're doing collections. The other thing that doing, managing properties, obviously things go wrong with properties, things need updating. Maybe you need to, in the UK, certainly you need to do a gas safety certificate every year. So we're going to have supplier documents also, which they need to manage. And in terms of what they're pushing out in terms of content, they're going to have professionals there who will need to go around and hand over the keys and the property to the leaseholder. But they might also be bringing in trades to help fix things, do general maintenance, for example. So that's the scenario we're using. We've got this company, and I think it just brings the whole story to life a little bit. Okay, so given the scenario, what are we going to show you today? So the first part of this process is what we call understand. So that's around document processing. So how can I take a document and actually understand what kind of document it is? So that's a classification. And then pull out relevant information from that. So there is a lease agreement. How can I pull out the start date? And so we're going to show you examples of that and also take you behind the scenes to show you how we set some of that up. So this webinar isn't purely just here's the end result, but we're going to show you how we got there as well. We're also going to show you document generation. So how you can actually create documents, whether you want to do that on scale. So you might want to create a lot of documents based on the same format and just let a Power Automate flow do that. Or maybe create a one-off document, but want to make sure that the right fields are completed in the right way. The third piece is Microsoft introduced advanced metadata search. So this is the ability to search both on metadata, not just based on that search box that you see at the top of SharePoint when you dive in there. And then we've got the manage piece. Now, the manage piece, we're not going to demo today. It's pretty tricky to demo some of this stuff, and I think we're going to run out of time. But we're certainly going to touch on these 3 points and explain what that means and why that might benefit you. So Ben, without further ado, should we go on to step 1, document processing?
Yeah, that sounds good to me, Rupert. Let's go.
Okay. So Ben, can you take us through the various types of processing models there are? Because when I launched into our Syntex demo, I noticed I was getting presented with a lot of information. I was like, where do I even start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few different processing models that Syntex provides. The first one is structured content. So what we're looking at is typically where you're receiving documents from somewhere else. They're not being produced internally by yourself, but you're receiving invoices, receipts, or other types of documents. And the key thing about them is that they are fairly standard in their structure. If you were to look at an invoice from one company to another, is chances are it has a very similar layout. And what you're looking to do with that is extract information so that you can again go and take it through a process. So as we can see here in some examples, although they are still a little bit free form, the content is fairly standardized in a standard place and a layout, and it's typically the same types of things that you're looking to extract. I think what's worth highlighting is we talked about invoices and receipts, and in particular, the reason for this is that Microsoft have built quite heavily trained models specifically for invoices and receipts to actually make that easier for you to work with compared to some of the other types of documents that we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, so we created our own type here called defect form, just for the example that, as Ben said, yeah, invoice and receipts, they've been pre-trained, so really accelerating you if you wanted to know, where do I start with this model? Okay, so that's a structured document. Let's move on to what I've called semi-structured, Ben.
Yeah, so in this scenario, again, it's information typically that you're receiving from the outside world coming into the organization, but it could be perhaps a bit more letter-based. So in this example, we've got lease agreements. Other examples could be things like master services agreements, NDAs, those types of things, which are quite text heavy, but typically there will be standard bits of information. They don't follow the same kind of structure as an invoice, and they could still be quite variable. But what you're looking to do is extract particular phrases or bits of information that is, again, fairly standard. The position may be very different, but the information is fairly standard between the different types of documents as they come in.
Okay, so typically this is a role done by a human, an administrator maybe, when they get these documents in, right, I've got to find the right information. And this is probably one of those things also where people say, oh, you want us to add metadata, do you? And they throw their hands up in the air. So if there's a way of automating that, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah. The final one is the concept of unstructured documents. I think it depending on where you look in Syntex, it's referred to as something slightly different. So nowadays, Syntex refers to this as the teaching method. So this scenario, I think, is slightly more tuned to maybe documents that you're producing yourself. So if you think, for instance, maybe it's in an insurance company, or if you're in a asset management firm or a building project management company, there'll be a whole raft of documents that you produce. In our case, we produce statements of work alongside all sorts of other documents. But what you're looking to do is extract that one or two types of documents from that pack and identify it and classify it so that you can go and refer to it later. So in the case of an asset management firm, it might be a loan agreement alongside all of the other things like models and letters. In our case, it's the statement of work. And what we specifically want is the signed version. In this example, it might be the certificates that we may be producing or receiving that we need to identify because we have contractual or legal requirements about those versus all of this other reams of documentation that we're producing.
Okay, so in this example, we've got what I call a property pack, and it has some standard documents in it, which is an insurance certificate, an energy certificate, a lease agreement. And so what the AI can do, Ben, is, and what I'm hearing is it can identify what kind of content that is. It looks at the document and says, right, this is an insurance certificate. And then from there, we can decide to do what with it, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different things that we might want to do. So the first thing is just tag it and say, this is the certificate. And that's going to help that compliance person go and find that document at a later date. It's kind of auto classifying and filing. The next thing that you might want to do is tie this into some of the compliance capabilities within Microsoft. So this does require the Microsoft E5 licensing to do this, but what you might want to say is, I want to find that signed statement of work, and I need to apply a retention policy that says that it cannot be deleted for 7 years. And maybe I might want to apply some encryption to it that's available based on the classification of that document being a statement of work, if that makes sense. And then the third thing that you might want to do is actually extract data from it. So instead of just tagging it as a statement of work, you might want to extract who the client name was, what the amount was, for instance, what the terms are. So this isn't fundamentally different from the Freeform example that we talked about earlier, but it does rely on a little bit more structure. Typically, it's documents that have been generated from a standard contract template, for example, and you're able to pick out the information from that without relying on people having to go and tag everything as they write it themselves.
Okay, so Ben, what I understand about renting out a property, certainly in the UK, you need to have a gas safe certificate every year. Could I take, for example, the expiry date from the last gas certificate and then use that to maybe create an action for me in 10 months' time to say, go and find a gas engineer and carry out another safety check?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we know, if we can extract metadata of a document, we can use that metadata to drive our business processes using the Power Automate functionality. So yes, if we can pull out date, then we can build in a reminder flow that says 2 months before that expiry date, go and start generating a new pack and notify the right people and setting up some tasks for people.
Excellent. Okay. I think that really helps. I mean, what we've got here, just a screenshot here. So I think if you look closely, I appreciate it's quite small, but this document follows a standard format. And the first thing that we can do as an unstructured processing model is actually identify the content type. In this case, we called it benefit change notice. And then given that, we can then start pulling information out from that document. But I think, Ben, we've looked at the models. Shall we actually see how they look within SharePoint and how they actually work?
Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. I think probably the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to do two things here. So one is we're going to show you what the outcome is when we upload classified documents, and then we're going to show you how to build the models. So Rupert, we've got our fictitious company homepage here. Welcome home. Nice pun there for our intranet. We're going to go into our business processing area, which is the property management site, which is where we're going to be doing this document management work. So first of all, we're going to go into our rental agreements area. So if you wouldn't mind just clicking into that, Rupert, thank you. So we have some existing rental agreements, and maybe if you just scroll along there, Rupert, on the horizontal bar there, we can see that there's a whole load of metadata that's been extracted and assigned to these documents that we've uploaded. Now, just because of how long this stuff takes to run, it takes a few minutes, which isn't great in a webinar scenario, although generally fine in real life. I think what we're going to do is just go and upload some documents quickly, let that run so that we can then go through and show the models and show you how that works. So if you want to do that, that's great. The other example that we're going to look at is the contracts example using that teaching method. So Rupert, if you wouldn't mind just jumping into the contracts area as well, please, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, so we've got rental agreements processing here. I've uploaded these 3 PDFs. So now I'm going to go into contracts, and what we've done, if I just show you here, is we've created some folders with some files, and we'll look at these in a second so you can see how they look. But generally, I think when most of us structure things in SharePoint, I know those who are very anti-folder, but this is how people tend to work. They tend to put a supplier name, and maybe underneath that there's a second level of project name, and they're putting those content there. So as you can see, it's uploading those 20 documents.
So what we're going to do now, while we're letting that run, we're actually going to have a look at how we build one of these models, and then we'll come back and validate the results of this once it's worked. So we'll have a look at this rental agreements one first. I mean, I have to say what they've done here is really, really clever to enable you to extract this type of information. So let's just go into our model. Rupert, if you wouldn't mind clicking the Syntex model link on the left-hand side there, please. What we have here is a model that has been generated by one of our colleagues. And what we're going to do is go and edit that model so we can actually look at how it's been put together. So if you click on the edit model button on the right-hand side there, please, Rupert. So Rupert, what we're going to do here is just run through how we build this thing. So you can just click on the back button at the bottom there a few times. So the first thing, if we go back to the beginning here, how we build these lease agreements. First thing we're going to do is we know that these lease agreements have some standard information that we want to capture. And what we've basically done is define what information do we want to extract from these documents. We've already set up a load and we can add some more. So you might want to create a new field or a table, etc., that you're going to use to extract and identify this information. So you define what labels you want. The next thing that you do is you need to, as is the case with any form of artificial intelligence or machine learning, you need to have some training data. So you need to have examples of the documents that you want to use to help you do this process moving forward. If you click into that collection, we've uploaded some example documents that have the different types of information that we want. So you go and find some examples, but notice we only have to work with 5 examples. If you've done a bit of digging into what all of this AI stuff is all about, typically people are having to work with hundreds or thousands of examples of documentation. But what Microsoft have done is make it easy for end users to be able to upload some examples and be able to go and take it on from there. So you not have to go and dig out 1,000 examples of a lease agreement before you can get started. So let's just cancel that a minute. So we've uploaded some training data. Next thing we're going to do is actually start defining where we're going to pull this information out from. Yeah, if you could zoom in, that'd be great. Maybe just one more time, Rupert, just because of how this is coming through on the screen. So what we're looking at here is we can see all of the different bits of information that we wanted to extract, the landlord, the tenant. As Rupert is hovering through those, you can see we've effectively drawn over the document where we actually want to pull that information from. If we wanted to edit that, we could actually go and change it. We could go and edit that value and go and redraw it if we wanted to do so. Yeah. So Rupert's just doing that. That's the one. Yeah. We've mapped it to that field. And then we've done that for one document in the set. Let's go through and do it to the next document as well. Now, again, even here, we can see it's still quite a different format, but we're still able to find the information that we want. So in this case, the landlord, the tenant, we've actually pulled down from further down. Okay, so we go and draw these different fields and map them for all these different types of examples. Again, much more of a free-form example here. So we go through all of those documents and draw out where we're trying to pull that information from. And it's not really that consistent in terms of where it comes from. And that's what we're using the AI to do. Otherwise, a human would have to go and do that for us. So now let's just go and move a bit further on, Rupert. So now that we've done that, we've effectively defined our documents, defined our labels, shown the model how to find that information, and then we go through and train it. We're not going to do that in the webinar, but it is just a case of pushing the button and allowing it to run for a period of time while it looks at that information that you provided and goes and does all the magic that it needs to do. The final step, again, we're not going to do that here, but the final step is that you then deploy it to the document library where you want to work. So Rupert, would you mind just jumping back to our property management area? We have this document library here for rental agreements. So in our model, we say, target this to the rental agreements library because that's where we want to go and work on this stuff. So now this is still taking a little while to go. So what we're going to do is jump back to our model and have a look at how we build the teaching method model instead for the contracts. So if you click on the models tab on the top left, we created a contracts model, which is using that teaching method this time round. So if you go and click on that one, please, Rupert.
The teaching model.
My bad. So the contracts one. Yeah, that's it. So similar concept here, but quite a different user experience. The concepts are pretty much the same in all of this, which is upload examples, train the model, test the model, and deploy it to your libraries. I'm not going to go through uploading examples, but we can see that we've got a whole load of different document types here. We've got some PDFs, we've got some spreadsheets, PowerPoints, et cetera, et cetera. We've got a whole load of document types that we've uploaded to help us train this model. What we're interested in doing is identifying specifically the PDF contracts. And what you may notice is that we've got both PDF and Word versions of contracts here. And what we want to be able to do is identify the PDF, i.e. the signed version versus the original draft version, and separate that out from the other things. So we've got some content we've just uploaded. And again, what you need is 5 positive examples, 5 examples of the type of document that you're trying to classify, and then at least 1 negative example. What I would say with this, the more the merrier. The more content you have, the better. But if you've got, say, 100 examples of documents, what I would typically use is, say, upload 70 for training and then keep back 30, which you're then going to use for testing a bit further down the line. Okay. So let's go scroll up a minute, please, if that's okay, Rupert. So what we're going to do now is do our classification. So we're going to train our classifier. We can see we've already got 100% accuracy at the moment. So let's just go into that. So the first thing that we have to do is apply the labels. What we're trying to do is say, is this document a contract or not? So we go through each of the examples and we say, is it an example? Yes or no. And so let's go to the next one. So this is a good one, Rupert, because it's a Word document. We don't want the Word documents. We want the PDF. So this is not a contract. This one's a PDF. Yeah, it is a contract. So we're going to go and mark that up. So we might as well finish through, go through to the last couple that are missing. Yeah, let's do that one. Yep. So that is an example. That's negative already. That's fine. We'll go down to the bottom. Yeah. Those last couple. Yeah. I've just thrown everything in here. So yeah, that's not perfect. So we've labeled our documents. We've defined it, how it behaves. The next thing we need to do is actually do the training step. So if you click on to train, please. Now, the Syntex's implementation is a little bit unusual if a bit about machine learning. You have your examples, but then you also have to enhance those examples with phrases or other types of regular expressions, which enhance its classification. Okay. So what we're using is saying, because these documents have got certain phrases in them, that enhances the likelihood that they're going to be this type of document versus that, as well as their general pattern. So if you click on the explanation there called statement of work. So what we're doing is saying we're looking for certain phrases. So statement of work, executive summary, agreement. We know that our documents contain these types of phrases. Okay. So we put those phrases in and it says if it contains them, there's a good chance that it's going to be that type of document. If you just cancel that a minute, Rupert, we're going to look at the next one. Now, the problem we had is that these phrases appear in both the PDF and the Word document. So how do we tell the model that this one is right and that one isn't? It's more than just saying it's a PDF or not. So what we need to look at is how the document behaves if it's a PDF versus a Word document. So if it's a PDF, we can see that this statement of work phrase appears at the very beginning. So if you scroll down the left-hand side, Rupert, we've got one specific phrase and we've said it's at the very beginning of the file and that indicates it in that way. If you then scroll up the right-hand side and then click through some examples until we get to a Word document. Yeah, so that's fine. That works. Good. Yeah, perfect.
I would say number 7, then.
Oh, marvelous. I've done it before. Yeah. Oh, not quite though. We'll get there, Rupert. We'll get there. There we go. Right. Perfect. Completely seamless. So again, because the nature of how Word structures its documents versus how the PDF structures its documents, we know that it doesn't match in this particular case. Okay. Now, this is obviously a bit of a contrived example. Reality is typically we're looking at a signed statement of work. So we could use phrases like, we use DocuSign. We could use phrases like the DocuSign envelope, for instance, which is some text that gets added into these documents. So there are other things that we can do to just more carefully distinguish between one type of document and another. Okay. So once we have trained the file, if you just cancel that. So once we've gone through and added those classifiers, it will go through and train. And what we can see at the bottom is that these files are indicating if they are matched or not. So basically what that means is, does the expected label that we applied match the model? So what we're basically saying is where we've said it's a contract, yes, that matches. Where we said it's not a contract, yes, that matches as well. So the model is behaving as we'd expect. So now we've done the training, we need to test it. So if you're going to test it, so what we need to do now is find some new examples of documents and go and upload them. Now, just because of, unfortunately, how we paired this data, we've used all of our data to train it. So we don't have any examples. We need to go and find some new ones. So what I might just do on the fly, Rupert, if you could go and add some example files here, please. Just go and try upload, if you wouldn't mind. Upload files. So if you just go back into our test data a minute, please, if that's okay. Yeah, just copy one of those and rename it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very, very contrived, but just because half the issue is just having some decent content. We've got loads of real suppliers and statements of work, but probably not webinar friendly, as you can probably appreciate. Marvelous. Great. So we're going to go and upload that file there. So we've got a test document that we've just uploaded. Perfect. If you can add that, please. So what we should now see, right. So we've got this document. It's testing it. Give it a second. It will figure out what it's doing. It will come back with a result. And it'll tell us what it thinks in a few seconds. I would expect this to be a positive match. Sometimes, yeah, maybe try clicking to see the result. It doesn't only takes a few seconds. There we go. That is a positive result, as I'd expect. And we could go and take some random, completely different document and upload it and verify that that was a negative result as well. Okay, but we're not going to do that for the moment because of time. So perfect. Can we click back a level on the contracts link there, please, Rupert? Okay. So the other thing that we want to do here is create an extractor. So if you click on the extractor, create extractor, that'll do. Yeah, that'll do. So if we have a look at our extractor, what we want to do is identify pull out certain phrases from the document. So in our case, we want to pull out the client name. It could be other things.
To
Go ahead.
interrupt you, Ben. So what we've done now is classified the document, and so we understand what kind of document it is. Now we know that we're now trying to pull information from that document. So the next piece, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're saying for all of our documents that we know are valid contracts, we are effectively highlighting the text here that we want to extract. So we have highlighted in this document here, we're expecting to pull out this particular phrase there as it's been highlighted. If you click to the next one, Rupert. So the next one is not a contract, and therefore we've marked it to say no label. We're not interested. Okay. And again, as you go through, you mark out the bits that you want. So we're saying what we're expecting to see. Then we need to train it. So again, let's just go back to training. So it's very similar to before. And again, we're building explanations. So if we look at my phrases explanation I created, if you click on that, please. What I'm basically saying is I am looking for text that sits within the two static values of project and client, okay, within this first section of the document. So I'm building those phrases. And I don't have to use explicit keywords. I can use regular expressions if how to build those. So what it's doing is then training it how to go and pull that information out. So it's a bit of business rules, but then sits on top of the AI engine that's doing that kind of more deep level machine learning. Okay. So I've created that. And if we have a little scroll down, if we then, sorry, my bad, just cancel that, please, Ruth. If you then click onto the examples of trained files, if you click through those, yeah, click through to the next one. Yeah, we can see it's correctly pulling out the value that I wanted. So as I was building this earlier, there was a bit of trickery to get it to pull out the right phrases and make sure it's getting the full phrase, etc. But what we can see now is it's correctly extracting the bit of the document that we actually want. Again, if I went a bit further, I'd say, yeah, no label. It's not trying to pull something out because it doesn't know where to pull it from. Okay. So Rupert, if you wouldn't mind going back to the contract heading, please. The final step, once we have our classifiers and our extractors, is to deploy it to our library. So if you go apply model, then what we can do is choose the site. So we're going to put it to our Syntex property management site. There we go. We've put it to the contracts area. So we can see that library already. We can, if you expand advanced settings, you can choose whether or not you create a new view. You can use a default view. I'm not too worried about that for the moment, but you do have to target it to a specific library. You can't just apply it to all libraries, if that makes sense. Okay. So let's just cancel that then, because we've done it already. So we've shown you how to build these models. Now, with any luck, we're going to come back to our document libraries and find that classification has actually taken place already. Marvelous. That's a perfect segue there, Rupert. So what we can see is if we go into rental agreements, those documents that we uploaded, you can see it took a little while to process them. It took a little while, but now actually it's pulled out all of that metadata. If we go inside one of those documents, Rupert, we can see there's quite a lot of info in here, and that model has correctly been able to pull out and extract that information so we can then use it as part of our process. And interestingly, yeah, this one, if you go back, sorry, Rupert, if you just go back to the library a second, please, if that's okay, just press, yeah. So I saw that one of those documents didn't have a deposit figure on it. So yeah, so this one didn't have a security deposit on it. So if we click on that document here, yeah, so that's much more simple. And yes, there isn't a security deposit in there. There is a monthly rent. So what I potentially would have seen or being expected is maybe it got confused between monthly rent and security, but it correctly pulled out the monthly rent figure and ignored the security deposit because it can find that field. It just didn't promote that value. So I think that's pretty clever.
The other thing I've seen here is the percentage confidence field.
Yes.
What does that mean, and how should I interpret it?
So this is a general concept within machine learning is that you can never be 100% confident that a document has been classified or the correct information has been extracted. It's very much based on probability. However, what we're seeing here is that our scores are in the 90s and maybe late 80s. So what it's saying is pretty confident that it's correctly classified this and been able to extract the right information. What you could do, because this is metadata that's pulled out, you could create a view on this library that perhaps only shows the values that are below 75%. And then those are the values that you may want a human being to go and have a look at to just validate, and then hoping that the vast majority will be in the 90s and you can be pretty confident. But those that are below 75% confidence score, maybe that does need a human to go and just take another look and make sure it's pulled out the right information. So let's go and have a look at our contract as well, because with any luck, that's gone and done what it needs to do as well.
So let's home.
Yeah, it's just enough contracts. I didn't put it on the homepage for some reason. Apologies.
There we go.
Yeah. So if we look in here, maybe let's click inside one of these.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So it looks like it's been able to pick up this particular document out of this swathe of documents, has been classified correctly and identified as a contract. So again, this scenario is where we've got lots of documents, a pack of information organized by a folder. But what we care about is that one particular document. Could you jump back a minute, please, Rupert? Go back to the contracts parent heading there.
Okay. And so, Ben, just so I understand, the AI has scanned all the documents and it said, actually, this document's not relevant. This is not relevant. This one is. And we've not only identified and classified it. So I see the content type here as contracts. It's also gone in, and as you showed us earlier, it's done by extractor. So it's pulled back that company name in there. And I'm guessing it could have pulled back other information as well if we put the time into maybe pull out contract values or dates in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's cool.
So now the other thing, this isn't really Syntex, but this is just a neat feature of SharePoint libraries themselves. So typically, if I am someone in compliance and I want to go and verify all of our contracts, I do not want to wade through the potential hundreds of folders that I might have to find that one document. So if you click on the view that says all documents and switch over to contracts, please, Rupert, what we can do in SharePoint is define a view that filters out specifically where it says contract, but then also flatten the folder hierarchy. So I don't need to go through and navigate each folder before I see it. It flattens that hierarchy and just shows me all of the contract documents. And again, that could apply to other types. But if you're someone that is involved in processing and producing these documents, you're going to be more familiar with a folder-based experience to organize it around a case or a product or whatever. But if you're in a compliance role or someone else that needs to go and refer back to the signed version at a later date, you can just flip it over to a view that flattens that structure and just pulls out that one particular document that you're interested in. So I think I show this to people, they're generally quite impressed how much of a time saver it is just flattening that structure. Now that works if you manually tag documents as well, of course. But yeah, that's quite a key one to be aware of.
Excellent. So we've gone through rent agreements, we've gone through contracts. I think the next thing we promised was actually how we actually create documents or document assembly.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's go and have a look at the generated documents library. So what has happened behind the scenes is, so as part of our scenario here, when a rental agreement comes in from an external supplier and it's been classified and the information has been pulled out, what we want to do is automatically generate a document, a simplistic form of that document that could be then used to drive a process further down the line, maybe a quick summary sheet that we might give to someone that's doing services for us, for example. So what we're looking at is a set of documents. Can you go back to the library, please, if that's right? What we're looking at is a set of documents that has been automatically generated as a result of that classification model completing. So we've built our Power Automate flows here that say, when our document is classified, go and generate this document based on this standard structure that we've defined based on our standard template. So that's how this works automatically. And we can see what those documents look like. You can use these templates, and we'll show you how you can build one in a second, but we can use these templates to manually populate documents. So if you were to go new document, Rupert, and go say new rental document, what we can see now is this standard structure, but then we've defined some fields that can be filled in. So you can then go and manually enter in these fields, and it will start populating the document in all of the right places. So as you highlighted to me earlier, Rupert, when we were doing a dry run of this, This is a really good example, perhaps if you're in HR and you're generating the contracts. They have a standard template structure and they have some maybe 5 or 6 fields that need to be filled in pretty much in the same place every time. But it's a real pain for that person that's got to go through and fill it. And you might have used things like quick parts and they're okay, but this is a much more intuitive behavior for someone. So they could go and say, new document, fill out those 5 or 6 fields. It'll go and populate it and generate that document for you.
Yeah, so I think the HR scenario, it might be like an interim pay rise or something like that, where you want to create a one-off document, but want to make sure that the format is using the approved format and you're not leaving maybe a field incomplete because it was on page 2 or page 3 and you didn't notice it. And what it's done here is created that rental document. So there we go, based on that data I've just typed in. So Ben, we've shown the manual approach, which is what I've just done.
Mhm.
We've also had the automated approach behind the scenes where it's created a document automatically. And actually in our scenario, because we can, we've also created a PDF of the same document. So that might be useful as well. When we were building this demo, we did come up with some limitations, and tell me what they are and maybe where this probably isn't a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think with these templates, so some of you may have seen a webinar we've done recently on configure price quote, which is where you're passing in lots of information into a spreadsheet and generating a document off the back of it. This isn't appropriate in that scenario. It doesn't really handle rows of tables of data. It's not good at building out headings in sections, for instance. So we have partnered with a product called Encodian that we use to do that. And if you're building that type of templating into procedures and processes, I think that is probably a far more appropriate tool. But for something that's a bit more simple like this, like that HR scenario, that's a bit more of intuitive to the end user to just fill in some simple fields in a very, very structured format, this is a good job at the moment. Now, this is relatively new feature and Microsoft are continually adding to the product as it goes. So it's the type of thing that you would expect to happen over time. And their roadmap includes things like the ability to add e-signatures into this as well. So we're seeing lots and lots of improvements, but for those scenarios of templates and tables and dynamic headings and those types of things, it's not quite appropriate for that.
Okay, so I think this is, a sort of basic version, ideal for letters and simple contracts. It's not for repeating fields, as you say, or creating an order form with a large number of items within that order, or more than one item, actually. So, then the final bit that we probably should talk about, or demo at least, was around the search experience, which comes with Syntex.
Yeah, so if we just jump back into the rental agreements a minute, Rupert. So when we come into this document library, if you click into the search experience at the top, what Syntex now adds is, if you just click on that button itself, please, the advanced searches, you now have this parameter-based search experience. So this, if you've used the olden days of SharePoint, you'll be familiar with this concept of faceted search, and they've been a bit slow to bring this into the modern platform, but Syntex tool that brings it in. So what we can see here is the ability to search based on parameters, content type, the file type. We can search perhaps on the landlord. So if we were to do that, we can combine our search filters into our documents so that we can go and actually get the results that we need. Now, obviously this example is a little bit contrived because we've only got 6 documents in here and you could easily just use the filters to do that. But where this becomes really powerful is where you've got lots and lots of documents ordered by or organized in lots of subfolder structures, and you want to draw out those documents based on certain classifications or categories and apply combinations of filters to get that overarching search result, which you don't get using the native experience. So we do see this is quite a good enhancement to that ability to get access to that specific thing that you're looking to do.
Yeah, I think one of the things which it doesn't do yet, which we're hoping will come down the line, is, for example, it doesn't treat dates and numbers correctly. It just treats everything as a text string. So if you wanted to look at something where the security deposit was over $2,000 for whatever reason, we're not there yet, but we can see the direction of travel.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff. So we talked about document assembly and the 2 ways of doing that. So either through Flow on an existing template or creating something manually, but populating those fields. There's a screenshot here. So when we share the deck, you'll be able to see that here, but essentially you upload documents. It doesn't work well with documents where you're using shapes. So if you've got very graphically designed documents, it does struggle a bit as to present those, but it works really well with things like letters, contracts, slightly, should we say, less embellished documents. We then talked about surfacing information, so using that advanced metadata search, which we showed you there. And then the final piece, which we call manage. Ben, there's 3 features or 3 areas we just wanted to touch on just to complete the story before we wrapped up the webinar.
Yeah, so we're not going to demonstrate these because it's a little bit dry. And I'd say that this section is very much targeted at the sort of SharePoint and knowledge managers within the organization, as opposed to the end users, which is what we would say, or power users that we were talking or targeting before. But the first thing is the ability to import a standard taxonomy. So let's say, for instance, that Reuters have defined a standard taxonomy for the legal sector or something along those lines. They publish those taxonomies as something called an SCOS term set. So the Simple Knowledge Organization System. We did have to Google this, or Bing this, I should say, sorry, before we did the webinar. So they define these standard published terms that you can then import. So you can basically import that XML or JSON structure into your SharePoint managed metadata service, and it will auto generate all of those terms for you. So you're not going to have to hand crank or write some scripts to go and do that for you, which could be quite a good time saver if you're a knowledge manager. The next one is content type publishing. So again, if there's any sort of SharePoint experts or admins in this, will be familiar with the concept of the content type hub. So historically, the content type hub would allow you to define your sets of content types and push them out to all of your sites. It might be a standard set of document types and then push them out to your project sites. What this now allows you to do is target that publishing to specific hubs. So if you have defined hub sites in your information architecture, then you can push your project management types to your projects hub and perhaps your commercial types to your commercial hub without sort of clogging all of those types up in multiple places. And then the final bit is the ability to generate reports against the managed metadata service or the term store. Term store and managed metadata service can be used, as you may be aware, fairly interchangeably. But basically, it's that central place within SharePoint that you define your taxonomy, all of your standard terms. We use client, we use procedure, we use contract. We've got these brand names that we refer to within our business. We've got XYZ product lines. That standard definitive taxonomy that you have. So what this allows you to do is report on where those terms are being used. It's been possible to apply those terms to documents for 10 years, 12 years or so. But the ability to easily see where those document types or those terms are actually being used across your suite of content is actually very, very powerful. But again, very much focused on a knowledge manager role as opposed to an end user worrying about that, which is why you're not really demoing it today.
Okay, so I mean, that brings together the services that are available today. Microsoft got a massive roadmap of things they want to do. You talked about one of those earlier being e-signatures. So there's a lot more to come next year. I think what we will touch just on is licensing. It is complicated. It took us quite a while to understand it, and I did have to run it through a licensing expert. But at the basic level, we're looking at a user license, I think $5, about £3.80 or in that for GBP. And that gives you everything, as you can see on this page, with the green tick. So access to modern templates, those premium taxonomy services, but it also helps you create those processing models. Now, it's an unstructured document processing model. You can run that. But if you want to use Freeform or structured, then you actually need to put what's called AI Builder credits. So how do you get those, you ask? So each user does get 3,500 credits per month, and that's capped at 1 million credits per tenant, which we worked out about 285 users. So anything beyond that, you're not going to get any additional credits. Now, that might not be enough for your needs, because what we've calculated is that's approximately worth 7 pages, not documents, but pages of or analysis. So you can see it's 500 credits per page. So what you can do is buy additional credits, and they sell those in batches of $500. Now, this is today's position. What we understand is this is going to change next year. Didn't get any clarity on Microsoft what that's going to be like, and maybe they're still working out themselves. So this is as it is today. But I think the other thing to add is you don't need to license every user in the organization. You can just license the users who are actually going to benefit from these services. So with this relatively complicated slide, that brings this webinar to a close. We've run for an hour, so thank you very much for your time. I'm glad the AI gods played their part and everything worked. We got there in the end. So thank you everybody for your time today. Goodbye.
Stuff. Thanks, everyone.